In some places, they would refer to an episode like this as showing you how the sausage is made. Here in Pittsburgh, it's how the kielbasa is made. All right, let's get that part straight here. Deborah comes in and says, hey, DK, Chris, and everyone. Hey, Deborah. Hey, everyone. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports, and this is the double shot of Steelers video that's going to focus today not so much on the what of the draft, but on the how of the draft. That's going to be the question that comes in way more often than anything else. As the draft is going on, as the draft is, ending, and we're either praising or questioning the various decisions that take place. That's where this needs to go. And we're going to do it unlike in other years. We're not going to do it afterward or even during. We're going to do it beforehand. We're going to let everybody know, at least to the best of our knowledge, how and who gets stuff done behind the scenes. Chris Halleck will be joining me after the break. I'm going to start with one thing. There is one ultimate arbiter of what happens in that room based on everything that I've been told over the years, been told as recently as a couple of months ago. That would be who you would hope it would be, at least I think, and that'd be Art Rooney. Now, you don't want your owner making draft picks unless, of course, it's Art Rooney's dad saying, no, we're taking Ben Roethlisberger. Okay. However, someone has to be in charge. And this notion that Mike Tomlin has final say, that's a Tomlin pick. That's a Tomlin guy. That's a Tomlin move. Unless he is scaring the bejesus out of everybody else in there, which I can't rule out, then that's actually not true. What's way more accurate to describe as an endpoint for these decisions is to say that Tomlin and Omar Khan, to a lesser extent, Andy Weidel, need to be on the same page. This was a Kevin Colbert thing. Colbert insisted that if we didn't, everybody in this room, have everybody on the same page, it was incumbent on whoever it was that felt a certain way to convince the person who didn't agree. Like, let's all go at this person and really convince them, not just to get them to say yes so that we move on or whatever, really go at them. And the craziest part of all of this is happening right now. When we come back, Chris joins us.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
It's funny to think of these guys sitting in a big old draft room right now, 9 days before the event, and having these discussions, and for that matter, these debates, these outright arguments, the whole pounding the fist thing. But that is how this works, because the process, Chris, is the building of the board. It's not draft day. It's the building of the board, the 1 through however many deep. And they'll actually tell us the number. Colbert used to tell us the number. It was 200 or something like that. How deep is your board? Mm-hmm. And he would say, because they knew that they would never get through, 7 rounds without all their guys still being up there.
Yeah, I mean, this is the time when all this stuff gets ironed out. And for people who want to know exactly what Andy Weidel does, this is one of his biggest job descriptions, is building the draft board. That ultimately falls on him. That doesn't mean that he has final say in the draft picks. That doesn't mean that he rules with some sort of iron fist on draft night or any of the days of the draft. But when it comes to putting the board together through input from scouts, from other people in the front office, from Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, everybody, Andy is the guy who ends up putting this thing together. And then from that point, that's when decisions get made on draft night.
Yeah, the decisions that end up getting made are in the moment or closer to the moment, I should say. They are based to an extent because they kind of need to be. Yep. It's not always purely best player available. Otherwise, you could end up with 7 edge rushers and you'd be silly.
Right.
Or this year, 7 defensive tackles. So there does have to be an adjustment that's made as the process goes along. But when you're talking about right now, when you're talking about what's being done and who the people are in that room, it's not just who you'd think. It's not just so-and-so scout or head of scouting or the analytics people, although they're also represented in there. It's the coordinators. It's the positional coaches. Why? Because they will have been, between all of those coaches, dispersed to scenes like the ones that you've been covering for us, Chris, where you go out to Mobile, Alabama, and you see the Senior Bowl. How many of the Steelers coaches were represented there?
At the combine, all of them are there.
All of them are at the combine.
All of them are at the combine because you have both formal and informal meetings at the combine. Now, the formal meetings are with Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan. The informal meetings are typically with a position coach. It could be with a member of the player development department when it comes to just that. There are a number of different people, but position coaches absolutely have a say. Maybe not so much at the Senior Bowl, like both coordinators usually go, and Arthur Smith and Terry Lawson were both in Mobile for that. You might see a couple of position coaches, but usually it's full force at the combine.
But the part that I think might surprise people is that they're in there. Mm-hmm. They're not just looking at these guys submitting an evaluation on a piece of paper and saying, here's what I think of this guy. If there's somebody that they feel strongly about, and look, they're not going to sit there and be chatty through the whole thing. Okay. There are the adults have work to do. This is what they do year round aimed at this event. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you're Terrell Austin or you're Arthur Smith, you're sitting there going, but I really want this guy. Hello, remember me over here? I want this guy. And they're gonna make that known in some capacity. It's not gonna be for a position, just to be clear on that. Because that would sound really selfish. Like, hey, what about me? I need a running back. It's not gonna be that as much as it's gonna be, hey, I believe in this kid. Okay, there's this running back that I just absolutely love. He's the one that I want. He's the one that I believe is a Steeler. I believe that he's a fit for us. And they've already heard this already. They've already read your report. But what you're doing there is you're reminding them.
Yep.
You're reminding them of what it is that makes that player a priority at a certain round. And that includes through the process as well. They're in there all through it. Now, I can tell already from looking at our comments today that this is all going to turn into a Mike Tomlin thing, because Tomlin is the one he's the bad guy and he's influencing everybody and they're all overwhelmed by his presence and everything else. And you know what? I wouldn't doubt that. I'm sorry. I just wouldn't. Wouldn't. He has that type of personality. He knows how to walk into a room. And what's his line about the trap? Walk into your trap and take over your trap. That's another one, okay? But he'll walk into any room and take over that room. He's been like that forever. Richard Jankowski here says, it just seems that Tomlin has a heavy hand on who gets drafted. Well, we can say that, Richard, but I could also point out a whole bunch of examples here that would shoot that to high heaven. Okay. They did take a long snapper. What round was it? The 6th round? Am I right?
Yeah.
How long was it since they took Presley Harvin? Okay. If you think Tomlin was in there going, we've got to have a punter here, we're going to draft a punter. Come on. What he does, and you'll hear this from his former players, from his former coaches, and of course from the current people as well. What he does is he tries to hear the voices. He if you're not speaking up, he wants you to speak up.
Yeah.
But ultimately, he is the decider. He actually is in this environment. I believe that. I don't think anybody ever wants it to go to Art Rooney.
And no, they shouldn't. But we're also at a time in which probably the fan base has the least amount of faith in Mike Tomlin that they've ever had, and so they want some sort of governor over Tomlin to overrule him. And to ease people's minds about that, there have been plenty of times in which Mike Tomlin's wanted to do something, and Art Rooney said no, or Art Rooney said yes, depending on which way Tomlin wants to go. Tomlin wants to do one thing, and Rooney puts his foot down and says no. Like, it does happen. Believe it or not. Some people don't believe it. That's fine. They can believe what they want to believe. But my whole job is to report facts, and that is a fact.
Jonathan says, can I blame Tomlin for the Terrell Edmonds pick in the first round? If it makes you happy, Jonathan, but I'm sure that if I had, Kevin Colbert sitting here with me, okay, and he were attached to some sort of polygraph or whatever, okay, or we had him in an orange jumpsuit and we were waterboarding him or whatever the case would be. You talk about getting your views to spike, right? And you asked him, who picked TE? He would actually be able to go through the entire process of who evaluated TE, which ground level scout got to know him, who got to know TE's family. By the way, great family. TE did just a great dude, but I got to know his mom over the years, and these are some really good people. Just throwing that out there. So, not that I scouted the TE. Don't be pinning that on me. And then, there's also going to be noises from within the rest of the room. There's going to be maybe Keith Butler said, we need this and this type of player at this time. And then positional need overrode it. And they all listen and they all pile it into one pot. And it's Colbert sitting there looking around the room. And it is, by the way, the GM that conducts most of the conversation, I should say. Okay. Yeah. And it's Colbert sitting there looking around the room and he says, all right, listen, we're going to take Terrell Edmonds. Does anybody have an issue with that or whatever? You could go through that entire thing without Tomlin saying a word. But I know how this works. And I know that he's unpopular. And I know that David Schaefer thinks that he's just a bum. This is all that David had to add to the program today. Mike is a bum. And that's just how it goes. Shaka Steele has to bring up the really tired and really weird argument. Sorry, Shaka, about the coach's tree, which I really can't stand. Steelers South says Terrell Edmonds was solid. Hey, TE still poking around.
Yeah.
Including with this team.
Yeah.
This past season.
I think Edmonds just turned into what most people thought he was going to turn into. That he was a reach in the first round, but it's not like he was some sort of like bust or just terrible player.
That's all. Yeah. High floor guy who's resilient and durable. And guess what? He is still today all of those things. TE could tackle. TE couldn't cover. And then the safety position itself morphed.
That's true.
In over his time since he was drafted. The PEF points out here that Artie Burns has been in the league for 10 years now, and he's still getting work. I got to tell you, where I come from, that's not a bust. It could be seen as a really, really bad pick. Yeah. And it was, because you moved all the way up into the top 10 and you might have confused him with Devin White. I still can't rule that out. But
Devin Bush,
if he's still playing, that's not a bust. If you're out of the league in 2 or 3 years, if you're a Huey Richardson to go way, way back, or you're just poof, you're gone, or you don't even make it out of Latrobe, you're a bust.
Yeah,
you're a bust. This is not, Bush is not a bust. John Malesko says, future Steelers controversy. Steelers draft Ewers in the 4th round this year, and next year's draft, Manning. Okay, we're really getting ahead of ourselves.
We really are. I even yesterday when we got a question about next year's draft, like favorite quarterback in next year's draft, I was hesitant to even answer it because there's a whole college season to play between now and then. A lot of stuff can change. Archman might not even come out of the draft.
Leroy says, I think everyone expects like peak level TJ Watt from all of the first round picks. Some players are just really good second contract guys. That's a very, very fair assessment. I've heard it spoken, in football that if you can get yourself, out of 7 guys, if you can get yourself 2 that really, really stick, that make a difference for you over the course of the years, then you've done okay in that draft. You've done professionally. Now think about that. 2 out of 7. Okay. I've heard the same thing in the NHL. That's a much, much harder draft to conduct. Players from all over the world, different whatever, and they're all 18 years old. They don't know English, and it's a different animal. And I've heard the same thing even in baseballs, where the draft runs forever and ever and ever. And you're bringing in players from, again, all over, not in the draft. The draft is just North America, but your overall amateur pool comes from everywhere. And they say the same thing. It's 2 players. Now, when they say that, they're not saying you have to get Troy Polamalu in the first round and Brett Kiesel in the 7th.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like there's only so many players like that on the actual planet. You just have to try to get as many of the few as possible. Michael comes in without a membership, dude. Then he asks Chris a question, dude. Like, he comes in without a card or anything. DKPS.net/join is the way to correct that, Michael. He says, hi, Chris. I hope you're not too traumatized from having to sit through the Pirates game last night. What would have been traumatic about that?
It wasn't traumatic. They won 10-3. It was their best offensive performance of the season. Now, granted, 4 errors and 2 terrible base running gaffes, but
and also you saw Paul Skeens get he was doing some really cool things,
frisbees
last night. I mean, it's and it's like he hit 99 miles an hour or higher with 29 of his pitches last night, and at the same time, the ones that defined his strikeouts were these dazzler, wicked, nasty off-speed stuff. This changeup that peeled away from a left-handed hitter,
literally spinning exactly sideways. Yeah,
I'm sorry, Michael. If that wouldn't entertain you, then you wouldn't have an interest in baseball, regardless of how the team has fared to that point. George says that Polamalu had to grow into what he became. Well, Troy had to be appreciated for what he was at USC. You had to look at Troy and say, all right, we don't have that position and we don't have that need, but we want that. We want all of that, and we'll figure it all out from there. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you just say, I'll take the football player and I'll figure it all out from there. When you don't have that, that's how you run into situations like if somebody had taken Troy and miscast him, and he's lucky. He'll tell you to have been a Pittsburgh Steeler that didn't happen. James Harrison was not so lucky. James Harrison, they couldn't figure out where he should be because he didn't have the height for this. He couldn't be an edge rusher because he didn't have this or that. And Debo just got totally miscast and ignored for way too long in his career, and it might cost him a spot in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I mean, just the one thing that I take from that era of Kevin Colbert and both Bill Cowher and Mike Tomlin, because, I understand people don't want to give Mike Tomlin credit for the earlier years. They just want to say
anything right now.
Well, or anything right now. But even his Super Bowl apparently wasn't earned, which I just still find hilarious. But that era, like, it did seem like they did focus more on just getting really good football players, like not just really good people, but also really good football players. Troy Polamalu being one of them. Didn't necessarily like a really good. Actually, Mike Tomlin's the first pick after Mike Tomlin became coach was Lawrence Timmons. They didn't necessarily have a need at linebacker. They had James Ferrier and Larry Foote.
You could not say no to what LT could do.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, he's the only LT I ever covered. So he's the only LT in my world, and that was the only thing I ever called him. He could do things that just other humans couldn't do. And to me, Chris, when I think about the whole BPA discussion, best player available, I think of guys like LT. I think of guys like LaMar Woodley, who was not at all a 3-4 edge rusher.
Yeah.
Okay. Until the Steelers brought him in. I think of just look at the athlete, look at the football player, and say, we're going to find a way to do something with that, as opposed to, well, checking off a position. To me, the greatness of those Steelers defenses, and in particular the one that I think we're now all starting to kind of veer toward with this discussion, is the 2009 group. When you're talking about those guys, you're looking at a whole room full of them. Those are high draft picks. Those were high pedigree athletes. That's how you do it, man.
But
you do it.
But they found some serious value in other places. Ryan Clark was not a high guy. I mean, he was an undrafted guy. And they scooped him up from, I think that was the Giants.
It was
Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Brett Kiesel was a 7th round pick. James Harrison was undrafted and cut how many times? For all the people who want to say that Mike Tomlin went with Bill Cowher's players, man, James Harrison was allowed to become James Harrison mainly because of Mike Tomlin, not because
under
of Bill
Tomlin. Yeah. And Debo will tell you the same thing in a better mood.
Yeah. It's just, it was a pure collection of just really great talent that they hit early in the draft, obviously, but they also got the value elsewhere where they needed it.
Mike swings us back to the current draft and says that Kenneth Grant is going to be the best player available when the Steelers pick. That's Chris's guy, of course. And what you're looking at is 21st overall. The pattern that I've picked up on, Chris, in recent years is that every time somebody starts pumping up a certain position and they say, oh, those guys are going to fall, there's so many of them, they don't.
Yeah. No,
it's true. Notice that?
There's a really good there's a really good chance Kenneth Grant's not even available at 21. I think probably most people have him in their top 3 when it comes to defensive tackles, and in this class, even with how deep it is, I could very well see 3 defensive tackles being gone by the time the Steelers pick at 21. And with all the players that they have visited with and hosted for pre-draft visits that are projected 2nd-round players, I'm thoroughly convinced that, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm thoroughly convinced there is an effort at least to try to get back into the 2nd round. And one of the best ways to do that is to try to trade back in the 1st round and pick up a 2nd-round pick in the process.
This, of course, triggers all the Tomlin and Cowher and whatever. Gruden won a Super Bowl with Tony Dungy's players. Funny how nobody ever says that.
But by the way, who was on that coaching staff?
I'm aware of who's on that coaching staff too. So that's also how that works. Mike Tomlin, for anybody who doesn't know, was on that defensive staff there. Michael Cross says it's frustrating that the Steelers haven't won a playoff game since 2016. I don't believe that's accurate. But if the Steelers fired Tomlin, there would be several teams lining up for service. All right, we're just starting to repeat cliches now. Yeah. The playoff game in Cincinnati, I'm sorry, in Kansas City was in 2017.
Well, it was I think he's saying it was like the 2016 season. So,
I'm not a believer in that. So whatever year it happened in is the year that it happened in, Yeah. DV says, I don't think Cowher is the answer. Cowher is the answer. What are we doing here, everybody? We're talking about the draft and we're getting into radio talk show crap. Sorry. No, but that's what all that stuff is. What happens a lot with this this fan base, I feel like more so than the other two in town, is there are trigger words that have everybody go, aha, mentioned James Ferrier, mentioned whatever, mentioned Bill Cowher, oh no, mentioned, and then everybody goes off to the same. Let's try to be a little bit better than that here. You got all kinds of other shows you can watch here on YouTube that'll repeat that stuff on a regular basis here. Mike says, with the recent injury, is there any chance that Shedeur Sanders makes it past the New Orleans Saints? And now, of course, and remember that what Mike's referring to here is not Sanders being injured. He's referring to Derek Carr having a shoulder injury that might keep him out of New Orleans' entire season. If that's the case, I don't know how, especially when you're picking that high, that the Saints can afford to get past quarterbacks up there. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. I think they're in a different spot. All the free agents are gone. Well, except for one. And maybe they can find him out on the beach and talk him into something.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints have to address quarterback. I mean, when you talk about a team that needs to address quarterback just as much, if not more so, than the Steelers, and the Derek Carr injury puts that into perspective, because what's the answer at that point for them? Because I'm sorry, if Aaron Rodgers is picking between the Steelers and the Saints, and he's going off of a chance to compete, the answer is pretty obvious. One team was in the playoffs last year. The other one was way far from it. And so, they've got to figure out what they're going to do with quarterback. If the Saints don't take Sanders at 9, they're going to take a quarterback early. They'll take a quarterback in the first 2 rounds, and maybe they have their eyes set on Jalen Milroe. Maybe they have their eyes set on Jackson Dart. Who knows? But they could always trade up. They can always take one of the elite edge rushers, possibly at 9th overall, and then use whatever other capital they have and trade that early 2nd round pick to get back up into the 1st round. And if you're the Steelers, you might want to take that phone call, possibly. You might want to be proactive and call the Saints and be like, hey, you guys didn't take a quarterback at 9th overall. How much you guys want to come back into the 1st round? And if you're the Steelers in this particular draft, I am all for trading back and getting as much capital as you possibly can, because day 2 is where the true value is in this draft. It's not on day 1.
Jim Pekarsky says, I don't understand why everybody in Pittsburgh is so high on Sanders since his visit. No quarterback in the 1st round. I have not gotten the sense that people here are talking about Sanders or thinking about Sanders. He just happens to be the last guy who passed through the building.
Yeah.
I think that would be the case of whoever is the last guy that passed through the building, and one thing to remember about these visits is that if you look at the Steelers' pattern between guys that they had dinner with in Mobile and guys that they took out somewhere else, they're just adding players. Okay.
Exactly
Yeah. It's not like you notice there isn't a lot of overlap. Like, well, they took out so-and-so to dinner in Mobile, and then they also took him to McDonald's in Indianapolis. And then they invited him to the South Side so they could all go hang out at the get-go across the train tracks. That's not what's happening here.
And for the quarterbacks that they have done that with, like Will Howard is one of them. Will Howard, they had a formal meeting at the Combine, and then they also had dinner with him ahead of Ohio State's Pro Day. Does that mean the Steelers are interested in Will Howard in the 1st round? I don't think so. That just means that they're interested in Will Howard in an appropriate spot
context
in the draft.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you still have to learn everything that you can about them, good and bad. Here, I see that there's an exchange happening in our chat between Sebastian down here, who's suggesting that I hate Mike Tomlin, and Mr. CJ, who is correctly pointing out that I don't like some of the choices that Tomlin makes. Whenever you're talking about the head coach or the head coach's status, first off, and this applies to Chris, this applies to everybody who's in our line of work. It's not personal. I hate him. I'm calling for the firing, openly, publicly, and emphatically calling for the firing of people who are running the Pirates right now, one of whom I really like. Mm-hmm. Okay, and that being Derek Shelton, who's been nothing but good to me. Got to know him a lot better than I know most managers back during the COVID time and everything. That's not fun. It's just the job. And he has his job, and that's to get the Pirates to become better and to become a winning team. He hasn't done his. I still have to do mine. I've never had a bad experience. I've had Tomlin blow me off and whatever else, but that's also part of his thing. Okay. You don't take that personally when it happens. I think I've told you guys the Hines Ward story where I'll tell you some other time, but it's just, let's just say I wasn't getting special treatment any more than anybody else was, just because I've been around there forever. Okay. And that's just professional. So I didn't kind of suggest that I didn't like some of Tomlin's moves. I said after this past season that the Steelers need to go a different direction, that they would be healthier if they went and changed everything that they do. And the only way to do that is to change the head coach, because he controls everything. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
Sorry for that thing. I saw these guys going back and forth. Who hates Mike Tomlin? This is a good guy who's done some really good things on and off the field in his lifetime. How do you hate Mike Tomlin?
Yeah, well, and people again, it comes down to the lack of playoff success, the X number of seasons without a playoff win, which I remember like
hate the performance, hate the record.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, some of my favorite memories on the beat so far have been off the record exchanges with Tom.
Oh,
they've been
fantastic.
Phenomenal. Yeah, they've been phenomenal.
Whenever he goes, this is out in Latrobe. There's a thing where he takes the writers out to a bar. Nobody's bringing their recorders or whatever, and he'll say stuff, and the reporter will come back to him and go like, "Oh, why can't you tell us this in the season?" He goes, "You don't need to know that, and I can't tell you everything."
Yeah.
Take it tonight and deal with it. Here's what this guy's problem, meaning he'll cite a player or whatever. Here's what his problem actually was last season when you guys were all ripping me for not playing him. ... Mm-hmm. Stuff that we don't know.
Yeah.
And as Rick says here, it's reporting facts, well, also the opinions. It's not personal. The opinions aren't personal.
Mm-hmm.
And
the opinions are based off of things and actual facts that we learn. I'm not just throwing stuff against the wall hoping it sticks.
And now Sebastian ghosted us here. He's gone, whatever. But I just, I really get a little sensitive to that one. Dave says, how many people on this chat are from Pittsburgh? No way of knowing that. I mean, really, how can you know that?
Yeah.
And if he means Pittsburgh, actual Pittsburgh, like the city of Pittsburgh, as opposed to just like in the general
area,
Allegheny County or Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Now CJ's still here. I wasn't saying you ghosted me. It's Sebastian just went poof because, oh no, the conversation didn't go in his direction. Jeff Rossi says, if Mason Graham were to fall, would the Steelers pass on him for another of the top tier prospects? He's never in the conversation, but it's due to his probability of going earlier. Or is it because of his fit in the Steelers defense?
It's because he's going to be gone in the top 10.
He's going to be long gone.
He's going to be gone in the top 10. There's got to be some serious concerns that pop up in the next 9 days to make Mason Graham not be a top 10 pick. He is a consensus top 10 pick right now. I haven't heard anything about Mason Graham falling out of the top 10. Nothing.
Yeah, that's not going to happen here. I have some questions that I started from earlier here. We'll get through these. Sean says, so what teams have 2 picks in the second round that pick after us in the draft? That doesn't necessarily be, that's not how it has to go, Sean. If you're thinking about this, if you're asking because, and I'm sure that you are, how do the Steelers get back into the second round? It's going to be by giving up future picks. It just is. It's going to be giving up future picks that they're confident that they'll be able to get back through comps. If they choose to do that.
Yeah, they could, they could trade back in the first round. Most likely. Now, I will say the further back you trade, or the further you trade back, that's probably a better way to put it. The better the chances are of you getting a second round pick. Now, you might have to throw in a future 4th, or you might have to throw in something else in order to really secure a second round pick. But even if you don't get a second, and you get possibly an early 3rd or something like that, and you end up with 2 third-rounders in this draft, I think you're still okay. Because, again, day 2 is – oh, there we go. Sebastian
coming through. Look at that. He's always going to be here. Good for you, dude.
But day 2 is where it's
We
at.
love you. I'm just setting the record straight, okay? I'm setting my record straight. Had nothing to do with you. Go ahead. Sorry, Chris.
No, I was saying day 2 is where it's at. A lot of the guys that they've met with in this throughout this process, especially in the pre-draft visits, are looked at as day 2 guys. which is, again, I think that there's an effort one way or another. Now, they could trade future picks. They could trade stuff from the 26th draft, knowing that all those compensatory picks are coming, knowing that they're going to be getting 4 compensatory picks next year, and that possibly multiple of those compensatory picks could be third rounders. So they could, in theory, trade away future picks and get back into the second, or get a second and a third in this year's draft. Whatever it is, they could pretty much do whatever they want because of what Omar Khan is laying the groundwork for next year.
Chris, appreciate everything. We'll hook up with another one of these programs tomorrow. Is that all right with you?
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
All right. See, you remember when I had the ending nailed last week? The ending of the Chris segments? And then gone, just like that. I couldn't remember it at all. So instead, I just went like, hey, Chris. Bye, Chris. Anyway, guys, let's take care of some business. Boss looking at me like I'm nuts over here. She thinks nobody cares how you end these segments.
Correct.
That is correct here. Barry wants to know if we're doing a live draft show. We are. We just don't know how many and exactly when, but I can tell you this, they're going to be members only. And the way to become a member is to see where these bobbleheads are. Okay, look over to the left of those bobbleheads. Oh, better yet, we have many, many markers to let you know that it's dkps.net/join. We had somebody storm out of here earlier. Oh, he's asking us for memberships. I'm out of here. This channel sucks. And there he went. And you know who will miss him? Nobody. What do they say about when you're leaving? You don't know. This isn't an airport. You don't have to announce your departures.
I'm sure he also pays for cable and Netflix and every other show he watches.
That's right. But this one's supposed to be free. This is the one. This is the one where he drew the line here. You know, he said, that's enough. That's enough. The Steelers show that I like enough to be hip, play and watch, I'm done with this one. Mike in Texas gifted us 5. Stella came in with 5. Always appreciated. Then Stella says, come on, man. Did you think I was going to stop at 5? And then she does a 10. Barry came in with 1. Laura came in with 5. That's a new one on me. You know, I have a pretty good memory about this kind of thing. And welcome, Laura. Same thing goes for JM with 10. Also a new one on me. And if you've contributed before, I apologize. It's just a lot of the memberships and the commitments, the gift memberships come in from a lot of our regulars. And anytime I see one that's new or that I'm not used to reading, I'll try to call attention to that. One last time so that we don't chase anybody else away like we chased an angry guy away. Go to dkps.net/join. It's 99 cents a month. It's nothing. What you're doing is supporting the program, but there's also perks, and there's also going to be members-only content that we create, meaning between me and Chris, we're possibly going to get Matt Williamson involved as we lead into the draft, as we follow up the draft. We might do something really late at night after one of these days, day 1, day 2, day 3, depending on how this thing goes. Again, I'm not holding anything back. We actually haven't had our meeting to figure out exactly what it is that we're doing with this stuff. So whatever it is, we want to have you along for the ride. Vic does that thing like where he sees that the garage door is closing. Okay. It is coming down, and Vic goes, I'm sliding right under that. When he comes in with $20 at the end there. Look at that. He says, congrats to his son, Bobby. He got married in Youngstown, Ohio yesterday. Good for you, Bobby Asher. Good for you, Mrs. Bobby Asher. And good for you, Vic, and appreciate having everybody here in this community. Appreciate everybody who watched this particular program. We will be back tomorrow with 2 things. One is the Ramon Foster show at 2 p.m. Eastern. The other is this show at 4 p.m. Eastern. See you guys then for both of those. Don't just pick one. Come for both of them. Yeah.